escapes from my pimp hands. I'm not close enough to get him. Sometimes I just don't get the Japanese culture, and it's hard when you're playing this game to kind of figure out, I wonder if the game designers were trying to be serious about the plot. I mean, was it really supposed to be like a serious anime type of thing with a lot of the Japanese culture, you know, anime elements thrown in to make it look like far-fetched stuff like a lot of animes actually are? Or you have to wonder, is it so extreme that maybe they're just doing a parody of the Japanese anime style? So it's really hard to tell. To be honest with you, if you're really not an otaku and a hardcore fan of this kind of a thing, the story's probably something you're not going to understand, you're not going to follow, and you're not going to give a damn about. And I personally, when I was playing this game, loved all the combat gameplay, but as soon as it got to a story element, oh, I just wish that I could just skip by it. It was just so painfully boring at times. But honestly, that's not what the game's about. I think really where the game shines is its overall presentation. And when I say that, I mean, it's not just a game about basic combat. And don't get me wrong, a lot of the game is just the basic combat, dodging, using different weapons and things like that. But some of the elements that they throw into this game that you might not expect, I mean, you have an entire stage that's riding on a motorcycle. You have a stage where you're riding a missile and it all of a sudden turns into a shooter game. The scale of the boss battles, I mean, you're fighting gigantic bosses in this game, the scale of which you really haven't seen in this kind of a, you know, a beat 'em up in a very long time. And it's exciting. It's like every battle that you have with a boss is completely unique and different. And you kind of say, wow, this is really cool. I want to see what they're going to throw at me next. What other kind of crazy off-the-wall combat could they throw at me? And this continues all the way to the end of the game. In fact, I have to say one of the best sequences of the game was probably about the last hour and a half. Because once you get to the final stage, you think, wow, this is it. It's the finale. Then they end up throwing pretty much everything at you that they possibly can, including second battles with all of the large bosses that you've already beaten in the game. You have to basically beat them again in a different method. Then you finally get to the last guy, and I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. I'll throw a couple pictures up. I won't spoil the plot, but basically, it's just surprise after twist after turn, and you're like, wow, this is crazy. You know, I thought I was going to beat the game an hour ago, and they just keep throwing content at me over and over and over until you finally get to the end and you say, wow, holy shit, I sure as hell have never done that in a video game before. And that's really where I think Bayonetta shines. It takes a combination of all of these different elements, you know, a beat 'em up, the Japanese anime comedy style, you know, the giant boss battles, the variety of some of the stages that they throw in, and they turn it into such a well-hewed package that it's very fun to play. And, you know, before I played this game, I went out and I looked at some of the reviews online, and a lot of them looked really, really high. I was like, how could just a standard beat-em-up get a 9? And I'm going to be honest with you, no, this game doesn't get a 9 in my book, but it was pretty damn good, and I'm actually happy that I took the time to play it. And speaking to that point, the game's pretty damn long, too. I mean, it's a beat-em-up, and you would think a standard beat-em-up's what, 6 hours, 8 hours these days? You know, how long were Devil May Cry? But this game's actually a good 12 to 15 hours long, depending on how much you take your time, if you really go around trying to search for these hidden items and things that'll unlock the weapons, if you look for some of the hidden challenge rooms in the game. There's a lot to do here, and that's a lot to say for a beat-em-up game these days. The one thing that really kind of annoyed me was the music selection, and you know, I could go into heavy detail about that, but I'm really not going to. There's really like a couple J-pop style songs, including some kind of a remix of the song Fly Me to the Moon, which I can't understand why on earth they chose that song for this game. It really doesn't seem to fit, but I have to admit, when the game starts, it's really, really annoying. It's just grating on the nerves, and you're like, man, I wish that I didn't have to fucking listen to this song. But then once you when you keep playing the game and you advance on, it kind of starts to grow on you. It kind of becomes the theme of Bayonetta. And by the end of the game, when this theme plays again, it's kind of hilarious at that point. You're like, okay, it doesn't annoy me anymore. It's kind of a funny inside joke because they've been playing this song through the whole game and you're kind of used to it at that point. So overall, even though the music's kind of silly, it's really not that huge of a deal. And let's be honest, if you really are so annoyed by the music that you know, you can't stand it, at least if you bought this game on Xbox 360, you have the ability to play other songs because you have the custom soundtrack option. So that is one more point, you know, now that we're bringing this up, that I do want to make. If you're going to get Bayonetta and you have a choice between Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, get the Xbox 360 version. And there's two reasons why. The first reason is because, just like I said, if you want to do custom soundtracks, you can do it with no hassle, unlike the PS3. And then number two, on the Xbox 360, this game was actually designed for that system. It was optimized for that system, so you're going to have almost a smooth 60 frames per second throughout the entire experience. On PlayStation 3, apparently they kind of had designed the game first for Xbox, and then they ported it to PlayStation 3, and it's, honestly, from what I've heard, it's a bad port. You get a lower frame rate, it's only like 30 frames per second, there's bugs, there's problems, so if you have a choice, unfortunately, I hate it when that happens. You get a cross-platform game and one version is better than the other. It would be nice if everyone had an even playing field, but in this case, get the 360 version. So in conclusion, Bayonetta, a surprisingly good game. You start out thinking it's just going to be a generic beat-em-up, but then as you get into it, you realize there's a lot of variety of gameplay, there's a lot of extra elements, and a lot of things that they added to the presentation of the game that really make it a complete experience. And the fact that the game is long as well adds to the fact, you know, that you paid $60 for it. Well, you got your value out of the game. So I was very surprised. It was the first game I played this year. I thought, gee, for sure, you know, we got to have a stinker to start. I remember the beginning of 2009, I played a bunch of stinkers back to back to back. I mean, there was, what, Tomb Raider, Prince of Persia, Afro Samurai, and they were all crappy games. This basically totally flipped me over on my head. I didn't expect it, hit me out of left field, and it's a pretty damn good game. Now, it's not perfect, and as you know, my rating system is a very, very strict, unforgiving system, and because there were some elements in this game that I didn't particularly like the music selection, the story that really made no freaking sense, and a couple other things like the annoying super armor that these guys have. And yes, I know a lot of people say, oh, every one of these beat-em-up games, there's guys who, as soon as they start their attack animations, if you try to interrupt, it doesn't matter, they still hit you. That still annoys me, and I wish you could have a game where if you have skill or you have timing, you don't have to keep dodging, but you can actually interrupt their attacks. But that's besides the point. Bayonetta, a pretty damn good game, and I have to say, if it maybe had something more, like a little bit of online play or some other reason to play the game back rather than just to play through the campaign again, it probably would have got a much higher score, but I gotta be honest with you, I'm gonna give it a 7.75. And that's only because I liked the game, I went through the game and beat it, and then I really said, man, I liked it, but I really have nothing else to do with this game. And that has to say for a lot of other games that I've played last year and this year. I really want to be very, reserved with my scores, because if I give a game like Bayonetta an 8 or a 9, what's going to happen when you get an amazing game like we had last year, like Uncharted 2 or a Modern Warfare 2, a game that I'm still playing right now and I'm enjoying? I don't want to give it a high score like that, because it's not. It's a game I've already beaten, I traded it in. That's why I give the games the scores that I do. So that's that. I'm an honest guy, and that's what I think of Bayonetta. So, very good. Thanks for tuning in to the first Hateful Truth of this year. And I just want to let you know, a lot of people said, well, we want to see you do Hateful Truths, but the two, really first new games of this year were Bayonetta, and then immediately after that, Darksiders came out. Actually, they came out on the same day. And the question is, which game is better? Well, stay tuned, because up next, we're going to have another Hateful Truth. It's going to be, lo and behold, Darksiders. So this is DSP. This has been the Hateful Truth. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time for Darksiders. Alright, as it loads, here we go. What the fuck do I do here? I guess I go down.